Senator Knox votes no. Senator Westreich votes aye. Senator Busolo votes aye. Has every senator voted? Every senator has voted. The Secretary will close this voting system. The Secretary will lock the voting system and record your votes. The Senate will pay attention to the results of the roll call. Those voting aye, 33. Those voting no, 15. The motion is adopted. The chair recognizes the senator from Polk, Senator Whitford. Thank you, Mr. President. At this time, I call up Senate File 418 with Senator Schultz. The senator from Polk, Senator Whitford, calls up Senate File 418. The chair recognizes the senator from Crawford, Senator Schultz, for opening remarks on Senate File 418.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, Senate File 418 is a bill concerning the words gender identity listed in Chapter 216 of Iowa Code. It defines sex, male and female, along with the related words such as mother and father. It strikes the words gender identity from Iowa's Civil Rights Chapter. It also makes conforming changes and identifies protections under the Americans with Disabilities Act. It is important, too, from the opening statement, declare why we need to take this action. Since 2007, gender identity has been listed in Iowa's Civil Rights Code. This characteristic is not immutable, as the adherents openly proclaim that gender is fluid and can change. Biological sex and race are immutable, as you cannot change these characteristics. Religion is not immutable, but is regarded as a fundamental right going back hundreds of years and found in documents such as our country's founding papers and the U.S. Constitution. Since 2007, we have seen abuses of this policy.
And changing facilities like locker rooms to be used based on biology. We have also forbidden puberty blockers and sex change operations for minor children. All these legal protections are at risk due to the inclusion of the words gender identity in our code. In fact, just over a week ago, a lawsuit challenging Iowa's requirement that your biological sex match the restroom. It's happening now. But the problem is not just protecting the safety and dignity of the 99.6 from unnecessary intrusion. It also affects taxpayers as well. We also passed legislation to refuse to pay for sex change operations and hormone therapies under Iowa Medicaid. That has already been struck down by a state court in Good versus Iowa Department of Human Services. It turns out we have already spent almost $2 million on these practices opposed by most people. In just minutes, we will hear dramatic predictions of people losing their homes, access to jobs, starving, and much more. Mr. President, when we look across the country, what do we see? 28 states do not have this special recognition in law. Among the states, Iowa finds itself in a peculiar spot. We are the only state to have the words gender identity in code alongside legal protections for women's bathrooms, sports, and for children from mutilation and attempts to protect taxpayers. This cannot stand. It is the duty of the state government to provide a stable, safe environment for Iowans. It is the duty of the legislature to promote and pass policies to achieve that goal. We are on solid legal ground in Iowa to look at this situation. Having seen the damage and disruption across the country, it is in Iowa's best interest, and we have a strong rational basis to choose to protect women, children, and taxpayers. That concludes my opening comments.
There are amendments. The amendments will be called up in the following order. S3011, S3012, and S3013. The chair recognizes the senator from Polk, Senator Blake, for opening comments on S3011.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, Amendment S3011 is very simple in what it does. It removes the strike related to gender identity in relation to employment. That's what this amendment does, and I ask for everybody to support the amendment.
Is there discussion on the amendment? The chair recognizes the senator from Crawford, Senator Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. President. This amendment would weaken the bill and cause conflicts within code when we have two different policies being promoted. I would ask the chamber to resist this amendment.
The chair recognizes the senator from Polk, Senator Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to thank Senator Blake for bringing this amendment forward. I also want to call out how terrible I think it is that this body, the majority party, is limiting debate on something as significant as this bill, similar to how they handled the abortion ban in a special session. Senator Blake, I want to read to you a story from an attorney just to highlight how important your amendment is. I am an attorney and I practice civil rights and employment discrimination. I represent a trans man. I will refer to him as Stephen. Stephen lives in rural Iowa. If you met Stephen in the grocery store, you would never know Stephen is transgender, as he looks and sounds like a traditional man. Stephen learned an area employer was hiring van drivers to transport people in rural Iowa who have special needs. Stephen spoke with the hiring manager, who confirmed for him the employer needed several drivers at the time and in Stephen's part of the state. Stephen applied, and it seemed as if he was on his way to getting the job. Somehow during the application process, the hiring manager learned Stephen is a trans man. When Stephen followed up with the hiring manager referred to Stephen by his birth name, Julie. The hiring manager then told Stephen that all the positions had been filled, but if anything opened up, Stephen would be contacted. Thankfully, Stephen is smart. Stephen had a friend who is not transgender call and apply for the job with the same hiring manager. Suddenly, the hiring manager had several positions to fill in the same part of the state and was seeking applications. A few days later, Stephen called the hiring manager back, who again told Stephen all the positions were filled. Stephen's friend then called, and once again, the positions needed filled. Senator Blake, I bring this example forward because this is a real issue that impacts real Iowans in all 99 counties. We should not be taking away employment protections for our friends, family members, and neighbors. I encourage everybody to vote in favor of the Blake Amendment that will keep employment protections in place for our fellow Iowans.
Seeing no further, the chair recognizes the senator from Johnson, Senator Walz.
Thank you, Mr. President. Would Senator Schultz yield to a question?
Senator Schultz, would you yield?
Yes.
You're in order.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Schultz, in your comment a moment ago, you said that this amendment, if adopted, would create internal inconsistencies with the rest of the bill as it exists. Can you give us more specific examples of what you're referring to?
It gives an ambiguity of a not clear uniform policy when, if challenged, the courts would have to wonder why this, not another, what they would try to put themselves in our head. Simplicity and a single message is what we are doing here.
So it is your intention with this bill, assuming the amendment is not accepted by Republicans, to allow for discrimination against people on the basis of their gender identity in employment. Is that correct?
We are working on this bill in order to protect women, children, and taxpayers, and it will be done in an efficient manner.
So it is not your intention to allow for employment discrimination against transgender Iowans?
It is my intention to protect women, children, and taxpayers from what has happened.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. President.
Seeing no further discussion, the chair recognizes the senator from Polk, Senator Blake, for final remarks on Amendment 3011 to Senate File 418.
Thank you. So what we have heard consistently, and I was in the subcommittee and I was in the committee, what I have heard and what we were just heard on the floor is the basis for this bill is basis related to protecting certain spaces, related to public restrooms, related to bathrooms and bathrooms, sports, and Medicaid. Those are the three areas that we've heard consistently over and over. In reality, what happens with the Civil Rights Code is there are five protections in Civil Rights Code. There's public accommodation, there's education, there is employment law, there is work or employment, there is finance, and then there is also housing. All the arguments that have been made thus far related to the big three, I will put it, all are in the bucket of public accommodation. Maybe education, but on public accommodation. Not one time in the subcommittee, committee, or here on the floor today have I heard from any of the supporters or any of the majority party, the Republicans, stating why we need to remove protections related to employment. The argument is, oh, we want uniformity. Well, the reality is that we can't rely on federal protections at this point in time. There are some Supreme Court cases out there that may, at least in the employment space, have some areas for protection, but what is in reality is going to occur, this is one of the last few areas where trans Iowans or Iowans in general have protections related to employment when it comes to their gender. Because this is bigger than just trans Iowans. When it comes to employment law, what we will be doing if we remove this component and pass it forward without my amendment, Mr. President, is what we will have is that if you walk in and if you look too masculine or you look too feminine, they could judge you based on that employment. They could refuse to grant employment based on that alone. This is grander and more broad than simply a trans issue. This is an issue for all Iowans. So removing these protections for employment law is doing a greater disservice than just impacting trans Iowans. For that reason, I will move the amendment and ask for a record roll call on the amendment.
The senator from Polk, Senator Blake, moves the adoption of Senate Amendment 3011 to Senate File 418. A record roll call has been requested. The Secretary will open the voting system and receive your vote. Senator Webster votes no. Senator Sires votes no. Senator Knox votes aye. Senator Costello votes no. Senator Westreach votes no. Has every senator voted? Every senator has voted. The Secretary will close the voting system. The Secretary will lock the voting system and record your votes. The Senate will pay attention to the results of the roll call. Those voting aye, 15. Those voting no, 33. The amendment is defeated. chair now recognizes the senator from Polk, Senator Blake, for opening comments on Amendment S 3012 to Senate File 418.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, Amendment S 3012 is also another simple amendment. This bill will put the protections back in place related to access to credit and financial institutions within the state. This will guarantee that those related to with trans individuals and Iowans with gender identity will still have access to the finances and financial institutions throughout the state. For that reason, I ask all of you to please vote for this amendment.
Is there discussion on the amendment? The chair recognizes the senator from Crawford, Senator Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, I would ask you to resist this amendment for the same reasons as the last amendment.
Seeing the chair recognizes the senator from Polk, Senator Bisignano.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Mr. President. The answer that we just got, I mean, is that going to be our answer as well? This is protecting women, children, and I mean, are we not going to have a debate here on this issue? I mean, no one else wants to talk. We're talking about something critical here. People's lives. These people aren't downstairs because they got nothing else to do. Their life's on the line, and it should be taken serious, and I don't think you're taking it serious. You filed the bill, you knew what you were going to do, you all got in line, and here we go, the exact same procedure. In a low voice that we could hardly hear, Senator Schultz gives us opening remarks. When we file an amendment, we get the same answer that he closes opening remarks with. Do you got anything legitimate to talk about why you're screwing people in housing, and in employment, and in health care and everything else? Can we talk about it over there? A little bit? Tell me what you think. I think I raised this when I did a point. You hurt more people than I've ever seen in my political life, and you never speak about it. The only thing you can't wait to do is say the prayer in the morning. Follow what you say. We're talking about people in housing. Senator Blake's taking it serious, and you're not. Most of you aren't even paying attention. This isn't your average bill running through this chamber. You're hurting people. And Senator Schultz takes pride in it, in the fact that no other state has it, we got it. Well, that's what we ought to be proud of, is that we're on the cutting edge of human rights. But if they don't fit your cookie cutter, we don't want them living next to us, right, Senator Blake? Or we don't want them working next to us. What have they ever done to you? Most of you don't even know somebody who's transgender. You don't even know them, but you hate them. You have to hate them because you cannot do what you're doing today if you didn't. But we'll say a nice prayer to start the day. We always do. And then we proceed to violate people over and over and over again. All they want is their fair shake in life. They want to be like you. They want to live with you. Something wrong with that? So I would hope you'd energize a little bit over there and defend what you're doing to human beings, instead of just sitting there smugly looking over here, waiting for 3:30 so you could force us to vote. And then you can get out of here. They're still protesting. And you've all kind of made fun of that. You don't pay any attention to that. No, they're not there because they got nothing to do. Their life is at stake, and you're not even talking about it. I ask you to support this amendment. It's not much. Neither is the employment amendment. But you've already decided in that room of yours, you're not going to take an amendment. You're never going to take an amendment. Shame on you. Shame on all of you Christians who want to keep talking about your faith when this is what God talked about? I don't know where you go to church and I don't know what you read. But being a good Christian doesn't take much. Do unto others. Take care of your neighbor. Keep your hand out of other people's pockets. Not much, but you wouldn't know it in this chamber. You wouldn't know it. You'd think that this side of the chamber are the most raging Christians in the world. It never stops being disappointed in this room. It never stops because we've never yet hit bottom, but we are getting very, very close. And you got your agenda and it's coming. But you're going to listen to me and you're going to listen to us. But we'd like to hear you, in your words. Tell us why you hate those people. Tell us why you want to grind them and take them out of Iowa, because that's what this does. It pushes them out.
Point of order has been requested. Senator, state your point.
Can we get back to the bill?
Senator Bisignano, I'd encourage you to stay on topic, please. Thank you.
Shame on you, Christians.
Chair recognizes the senator from Johnson, Senator Walls.
Thank you, Mr. President. Would Senator Schultz yield to some more questions?
Senator Schultz, would you yield?
Yes.
Senator Walls, you are in order.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Schultz, in your response to the introduction of Senate Amendment 3012, I'm trying to get some more clarity from you on the actual impact of this amendment to the bill if it were taken up. I mean, do you think that it is morally right to deny somebody a credit card or a personal loan based exclusively on the fact that they are or are perceived to be transgender?
That's the question?
Yeah.
I think that it is our prerogative as the state legislature to put forth a policy that protects men, women, children, and protects taxpayers. And the way you do that is to officially put forward a consistent language in a bill that makes the intent clear that the protection of women, children, boys, little boys, is a state prerogative.
So do you think that it is morally right to deny somebody a credit card or a personal loan based only on the fact that they are or are perceived to be transgender?
I resist anybody discriminating against anybody, assaulting anybody, doing anything wrong against anybody. But this bill addresses protecting women and children and taxpayers, and it is going to go forward in a manner which will not lend itself to a duplicitous message of here or there different policies. We're going to remove the words gender identity from code, as I said, and we are resisting this amendment for consistency.
So you're okay with denying somebody access to a credit card or a personal loan? Senator, that's what this amendment fixes.
You are putting words in my mouth, as you are wont to do. We have had this more times. You tried to trap me with a Ronald Reagan quote that I wouldn't play with. You won't put words in my mouth. The message is we are going to put together a straightforward, easy to understand, not duplicitous message bill that protects women and children and taxpayers.
Senator, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth. I'm trying to get an answer from you. Because you're not answering the question. The question is, do you think it is morally right to deny someone access to credit because they are or are perceived to be transgender? And you won't say yes or no.
I am saying that we have 28 states without this language in their codes, and we don't have a problem.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Senator Schultz. Look, the refusal by Senator Schultz to deliver a yes or no answer to a simple question, which is whether or not you believe it is a morally correct and should be a state-sanctioned decision to discriminate against an Iowan in their attempts to access credit because they are or are perceived to be transgender, underscores what this is all about, Mr. President. If the senator from Crawford County believes that that is wrong, I would hope that he would reverse his position and join me in voting in support of Senate Amendment 3012. If the senator from Crawford believes that it is morally correct to deny transgender Iowans access to credit because they are or are perceived to be transgender, he should have the courage of his convictions to say that on the floor of the state Senate. The refusal to actually answer the question, to actually engage in debate and conversation on this topic, is beneath the dignity of this chamber. Mr. President, this is serious stuff. And this line is not an answer at all. It's not.
Seeing no further discussion, the chair recognizes the senator from Polk, Senator Blake, for final remarks on Amendment 3012 to Senate File 418.
Let me explain the impact of what this amendment, if it's voted down, will happen on Iowans in this state. The only thing that is keeping banks and financial institutions from being able to prejudice on the basis of gender identity is a federal rule. Not a law, not a court case, it's a rule. And you know, it is at the whim of a president that's hanging up behind you on whether that rule stays in effect. And there has already been rules put in place and executive orders put in place that are rolling back the protections for those with gender identity through across the nation. So the fact that this rule at the federal level even has some level of existing, I give it a snowball's chance in hell that it lasts by the end of the year. So the one thing in our state that will have any defense related to allowing to have Iowans have access to credit is this law. And so when you sit here and tell us that you're trying to protect women and trying to protect men, what does this do to protect those folks? What we're doing is shutting off credit to people. That is what this does. So be honest with us, please, about what is the point. And so I ask, Mr. President, I move the amendment and ask for a record roll call vote on this, on the amendment S3012.
A record roll call has been requested. The Secretary will open the voting system and receive your vote. Senator Webster votes no. Has every senator voted? Every senator has voted. The Secretary will close the voting system. The Secretary will lock the voting system and record your votes. The Senate will pay attention to the results of the roll call. Those voting aye, 15. Those voting no, 33. The amendment is defeated. Just a point, Senate rules prohibit the gallery from commenting or talking or cheering or jeering or doing anything to disrupt the decorum of the Senate. The chair calls up amendment number S3013 to Senate File 418 and recognizes the senator from Polk, Senator Blake, for opening remarks on amendment 3013.
This bill, and I'm sure the Republicans saw this coming, What this bill, what it does is remove the strike related to the protections for those with gender identity related to housing. Again, and this is an essential protection for individuals to the right of shelter and the ability to live in our state. For that reason, I implore everybody to support this amendment. Thank you.
Is there discussion on the amendment? Senator Schultz. The chair recognizes the senator from Crawford, Senator Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, the same reasoning would make me ask you to resist this amendment again. The bill is written as a whole, and I ask that we do not accept this amendment.
Rule 18, there's been a call to the Senate. All senators are requested to remain in the Senate chamber for the duration of the debate this afternoon. The chair recognizes the senator from Lynn, Senator Bennett.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Blake. I really appreciate this amendment because it speaks to what Iowans have been subjected to in the past and can be subjected to without civil rights protections. And once again, I just have to say that it is outrageous that you even have to file this amendment because this entire bill is outrageous. Iowa should not become the first state in the nation to remove an entire group of people from civil rights protections. However, since Iowa Republicans have insisted upon calling this bill forward, we need to hear the words of one of our colleagues in the House. I want you to listen to the experiences of Representative Amy Wichtendahl, somebody who I've known since college, somebody I've worked with in the private sector, and somebody who I call a good friend. What I want you to think about is her experience, and I'm going to read her words to you. Have you ever had to look into your 3-year-old's eyes and explain to him why he doesn't have a house? Have to explain to him why he's now living with strangers and what happened to his room and all of his toys? Have you ever had to do that? Amy has. The same week I transitioned on the job, these are Amy's words, I received a letter from my property manager that I had 30 days to move. I had always paid my rent on time. The unit next to mine sat empty for 6 months, and they would not tell me the real reason they wanted me gone. No attempt to secure a new lease, just 30 days, get out. Do you know the humiliation of losing your home? I pray that you never do, and I never want that for anyone. This bill revokes our protections to our jobs, our homes, and our ability to ask credit. In other words, it deprives us of our life, liberty, and our pursuit of happiness. Please support the amendment before us today.
The chair recognizes the senator from Black Hawk, Senator Dotzler.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, here we go. The last amendment, and we're resisting it. What really gets me is what has happened about a call for the Senate. I mean, not a call for the Senate, but it called for a time certain, which required us to do a call for the Senate because we only have so long to express ourselves, and with members out of the chamber, that eats the time up. That's the reason for that. I've been in the legislature for 29 years. And it's been policies when I was in the House and on a bill here where you kind of paper a bill. You try to put a bunch of amendments up to take time up, to wear people down, and that isn't what was occurring here. We had 3 amendments. 3 amendments that were key to this bill. And we have debate shut off. And I ask the question, why? Are you afraid to hear the truth? Are you afraid that somebody's going to ask you to get up and explain your position on this amendment? You use a typical trick to get something through. Hold a subcommittee in the morning, hold a full committee later that day, and then have a debate as soon as possible so the public doesn't have a chance to get worked up. Well, listen, they're worked up. In my 29 years of being here, I have never seen the majority party abuse a time certain like this. This is a full workday. We weren't planning on running 1 million amendments.
Point of order has been called. What's your point? He went to tell someone that have to cancel the meetings because we've been restricted to the chamber.
You got staff for that.
Senator Dotzler, continue, please.
Never in my time in the Senate has this ever been done. And it's because you don't want to hear the truth. You don't want to keep talking about it. You know, when I was in control and our team as Democrats were controlling this chamber for 10 years, we listened to everything you had to say. We went through every amendment, and we never put a muzzle on you. So here we are in this. It's pretty clear where you're coming from, and I know most of you very well. And I'm actually shocked of where you're going with this. This morning, I listened to a prayer, and Jesus' name was brought up. And I know we have prayer groups here, and you go in and study the Bible. Well, evidently, you skip some of the paragraphs in some of the areas, because you wouldn't be treating people like this. And you put your hands over your heart this morning like I did and recited the Pledge of Allegiance. And what does that say at the very end? What does it say? You all know that. For liberty and justice for all. Try to tell me that transgender people aren't people and they don't deserve liberty and justice. Try to tell me that, and try to tell yourself that. And look what you're going to do. You're going to, and it's you, this state is going to become the first state in the nation to back up on civil rights. You get to carry that honor with you as long as you live, because you're going to take the votes to do it. When I go to my grave, I will not have to face that. It's you and your individual votes. And how could you do it? I know you personally. You're a lot of their good people here. And you follow along with some kind of political agenda to win more seats? For God's sake, there's only 16 of us. How many more you need to fool Iowans?
Point of order has been requested. State your point, Senator Evans.
I request that the topic be addressed in the debate. We're wandering away from the amendment at hand.
Senator Dotzler, I'll repeat a second time. Let's confine our remarks to the content of the bill.
Well, I was talking about the amendment. I was hoping you'd listen and finally do something to help at least mitigate the problems of this bill. You've turned down 2 amendments. You're about to turn down this one. And is anything more important than housing? Is there anything more important than shelter? I was standing in the middle of that rally downstairs, and a Latino family came up to me, a mother and her children, and she said, "I'm worried about what's next. Are they going to throw me out of my house eventually in my home?" I had a trans woman, I guess she sent me an email about telling me to do something, walk out of the place, just do something crazy. Now, I'm tired of just speeches. You need to do something. And I told her through an email that there's no stopping this. It's going to come. She said, "I'm so worried about me being kicked out of my home because this is something that they can now discriminate against, and it's okay." You realize what this stuff says? It's okay to do this. The legislature gets to decide, and it's all right. Senator Schultz, I don't see what this has to do with protecting people in their restrooms, in their locker rooms, and children by kicking people out of their homes and discriminating against them to even get into a place because I don't like how you look. That's not Iowa. That's supposed to be Iowa nice. So much for that. Thank you.
Seeing no further discussion, the chair recognizes the senator from Polk, Senator Blake, for final remarks on Amendment S3013 to Senate File 418.
So much like the other amendments, I will spend my closing explaining what is about to happen to Iowans if this amendment is not passed. At the federal level, there is one protection related to housing, and it's really the fair housing. The only way, the extension of that to those that are trans and those with gender identity is based on guidance that was provided under the Biden administration. What exists now is we already have a Trump administration that has likely rescinded that. It may not be a specific memo, but I would contest that that federal protection is probably out the door. So, if this amendment is not passed through in the state of Iowa, because there is no federal counterpart related to this, is individuals that are trans or individuals that have gender identity issues, even just cisgender individuals, straight individuals that look more feminine or look more masculine, could be discriminated against in the state of Iowa because we aren't putting this amendment back and creating this protection, Mr. President. That is the repercussions of not putting this back in. Again, as been said before, what does this have to do with protecting people in bathrooms? We are potentially denying folks who are just wanting to exist from being able to enter and get a home based on their status of who they are. So that please, at least for shelter, please pass this. For that, I move the amendment, Mr. President, and ask for a record roll call vote.
The senator from Polk, Senator Blake, moves the adoption of Senate Amendment 3013 to Senate File 418. Record roll call has been requested. The Secretary will open the voting system and receive your vote. Senator DeWitt votes no. Has every senator voted? Every senator has voted. The Secretary will close the voting system. The Secretary will lock the voting system and record your votes. The Senate will pay attention to the results of the roll call. Those voting aye, 15. Those voting no, 33. The amendment is defeated. This disposes of all amendments. We are now back on Senate File 418. Is there further discussion? The chair recognizes the senator from Polk, Senator Blake.
Thank you. Thank you to the Republicans for making it abundantly clear what this bill is for. We just provided 3 opportunities to put protections back in place that relate to things that do nothing related to the issues brought up today about protecting whatever. We provided 3 opportunities to add housing, to add employment, to add access to credit back into statute. But what we got instead was a clear message of what this intent of this bill is. This is meant to utterly remove, utterly eradicate gender identity from Iowa. This isn't meant to protect anybody. It's not. If it was meant to protect somebody, we would have narrowed the scope of this bill just now. We would have kept the protections in place to allow Iowans to still have right to housing, to employment, and to credit. If this was meant about protecting folks, we would still be protecting Iowans. But instead, it has been made abundantly clear that we want, not we, the Republicans, want to remove trans Iowans from Iowa. They want to make it difficult to live in this state. They want to make it that you can be discriminated when you walk in and you're trying to apply for housing. That if you look a little bit different, that if you identify in a different way, you will be denied, or you could be. Never in the history of the United States that rights that have been granted to a people have been stripped away like this. Never. And the argument that was made earlier, that the reason for this bill is because there is this conflict within law. That is a bunch of poppycock. Why? Because the way that statutory interpretation occurs is that when there is a conflict in bill, the most recent bill controls. So all these bills that have already done all the things that you want to do related to protections would likely have already amended the Civil Rights Act. So they already have the force of law. This is an entirely unnecessary step. This is pushing on a group of minority of people and pushing them down. There is already these protections in place. There is no conflict. The bills that were passed a few years ago control. These protections are in place. So instead, what we have is this bill in front of us. And let me explain a little bit more, too, related to what the Civil Rights Act does. Because I've heard from time to time that the point of this is to elevate the rights of others. It's to elevate a certain group above all others. And that, pardon my French, is bullshit. What it does...
Point of order has been called.
All right.
Senator Zumbaugh, state your point.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is the Iowa Senate, and I don't appreciate the profanity in a very serious discussion. So, Senator, please.
I will refrain from swearing moving forward.
Senator Blake, that is expressly prohibited.
Yes.
By the Senate rules. Please refrain.
I will
carry on.
When it comes to the civil rights and what that law does, it doesn't elevate any rights over the other. What it does, it gives people the right to enter the room in the first place. So if I, a straight white male, were to apply, and a trans individual were to apply for the same job, it's not giving them preference over me, it's making sure that they have the right to be heard in the first place. My credentials versus theirs would still have to control. But it makes sure that that individual has the right to be in that interview in the first place. And when you remove these protections and you remove that, you are keeping a certain group of people out of this discussion, because it becomes a permissible part of the law in the state of Iowa. There was also discussion earlier related to mutable traits. Again, there are parts of our code that are not immutable. Religion and disability. Religion is not something that is innate to a person. Yes, you may believe you do that, but that is not something that is an immutable characteristic to yourself. And disability could be something you're born with or gain later in life. So to use that argument that this is an immutable trait tends to forget that there are other protections in the law. And I've hinted at this before. This goes beyond just trans individuals. This impacts all Iowans. All Iowans will be subject to new levels of discrimination throughout this state. If somebody happens to be more feminine,